He was a father trying to hold his world together with shaking hands, a man fighting storms no one else could see. His 8-year-old daughter still waited at the window for a mother who would never return, and their tiny house creaked under the weight of silence. Each morning felt like a battle, each night like a quiet defeat. But one rainy afternoon, everything changed as a woman he barely knew stepped into their broken home, and without meaning to, began rebuilding not just the walls around them, but the hearts within. Yet just when life finally started to bloom again, the past returned, knocking louder than ever. Ade's mornings had turned into a daily disaster he no longer had the strength to hide. Burnt breakfast filled the kitchen with smoke. Ada's school uniform stayed wrinkled no matter how many times he tried smoothing it, and the laundry basket had become a permanent mountain of surrender in the corner. He moved through each day like a man stitched together with frayed thread, always one breath away from unraveling. But the nights were the worst. That was when the house went silent. That was when Ada's sadness spoke the loudest. She never complained, never demanded, never cried out loud. She simply grew quieter, her eyes losing a little more light every day. She clutched her mother's old scarf every night, as if the faded fabric could fill the growing emptiness her heart didn't know how to name. And Ade, he watched helplessly. Her pain carved him open from the inside. It reminded him of everything he had failed to be one evening, as Ade spilled noodles all over the floor while trying to make dinner. Femi, his closest friend and sometimes his only lifeline, finally snapped. "Ade," he said firmly, grabbing the pot from his shaking hands. "You can't survive like this. Ada can't survive like this. You need help." Ade hated how true those words felt. Help meant admitting he wasn't enough. Help meant exposing the weight he'd been pretending he could carry alone. But looking at his daughter, curled on the couch with tired eyes, he knew Femi was right. With a reluctant sigh and a heart heavy with guilt, Ade nodded. "Fine, I'll hire someone." For the first time in months, there was the smallest flicker, a glimmer of hope, quietly entering their collapsing world. Grace entered their lives the way soft rain slips into dry soil, quietly, gently, without asking for permission, yet changing everything it touches. When she first walked through the door, Ada peeked at her from behind Ade's legs, her big eyes filled with caution. The house smelled of burnt toast and exhaustion. Dishes were piled high, toys were scattered across the floor, and the air felt heavy, like a room that had forgotten how to breathe. But Grace, she didn't flinch. She smiled, a warm, steady smile that carried a sense of calm even the walls seemed to respond to. Within the first hour, something shifted. She tied her hair back, rolled up her sleeves, and moved through the house with a gentle authority. The kitchen filled with the aroma of real food, food that tasted like comfort, not desperation. The laundry found its way into neat stacks. Ada's toys, once scattered like confetti, were sorted and placed with care. IT wasn't just cleaning, IT was restoration, a slow stitching back together of everything life had torn apart. But her real magic wasn't in mops or meals. That IT was the way she saw Ada. Where Ade saw quiet sadness, Grace saw a little girl holding her grief like a secret. She knelt beside Ada, spoke to her softly, painted tiny worlds of color with her, taught her songs, and brushed her hair with hands that carried patience instead of hurry. For the first time in months, Ada laughed. Not the polite, small chuckle she gave to make her father feel better, but the full, bubbling laughter of a child who finally felt safe again. Ade heard that laugh in the hallway one afternoon and stopped in his tracks. He leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, and let the sound wash over him. It felt like oxygen, like sunlight cracking through a winter sky. Every day after that, Grace brought more warmth into their home. Morning routines stopped being battles. Ada woke up excited. Breakfast smelled like cinnamon instead of charcoal. The house sparkled. Ade's shoulders slowly began to relax. The dark circles under his eyes softened. The constant ache in his chest eased. One night, as he walked into the living room, he found Ada and Grace on the floor surrounded by colored papers and glitter. They were making a happy home jar, tiny notes of things that made Ada smile that day. Ada held up one paper proudly. "Daddy, look." Today I wrote. Grace braided my hair like Mommy used to. Aid froze. Grace paused too, her eyes softening with understanding instead of discomfort. Later that night, when Ada had fallen asleep, he whispered, "Thank you for giving her something I couldn't." Grace didn't reply immediately. She just gave a quiet, knowing smile, the kind someone gives when they understand pain more deeply than they admit. And slowly, very slowly, Aid found himself drawn to her. Not because she helped, not because she fixed things, but because she cared genuinely, patiently, consistently. He found himself watching the way she tucked Ada's hair behind her ear, the way she hummed softly while washing dishes, turning even small tasks into moments of peace, the way she placed her hand on Ada's shoulder when the girl felt overwhelmed, steady, comforting like an anchor. Sometimes he caught himself staring too long. Sometimes she caught him, and she'd look away with a shy smile that made his heart stumble. He never said it out loud, but he felt it, growing quietly inside. That a feeling he thought he'd buried with the grief of losing his wife. He fell for her. Not suddenly, but slowly, deeply, dangerously, the way one falls asleep without realizing when it begins. Grace became part of their rhythm. Their home no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a place where healing lived, and still, neither of them said a word about the way their glances lingered, the way their conversations held unspoken tenderness, the way Aid's heart steadied, just knowing she was in the next room. Some nights, he'd stand at his doorway, watching Grace read Ada a bedtime story, Ada's head resting on her shoulder, Grace's voice soft and warm, the lamp glowing gently behind them. And Aid would feel something he had not felt in years. Hope. Hope that life wasn't done giving him reasons to smile. Hope that love could return to a heart he believed was too broken to hold it again. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this woman who brought light into his home might someday bring light into his life. 2. Grace entered quietly, but her presence echoed loudly through every room, every laugh, every breath of peace. And without saying a single word, she changed everything. For weeks, life had begun to find a gentle rhythm, one woven with laughter, warmth, and the steady heartbeat of a home healing. Ada's eyes sparkled again. Aid breathed without feeling like his chest was collapsing, and Grace moved through the space with the quiet assurance of someone who belonged there, even if she never said it. But storms have a cruel habit of striking when skies look the calmest. Tea happened on a Saturday morning. Aid was fixing the kitchen drawer, Ada was drawing butterflies, and Grace was humming while folding the laundry. The whole house felt like a soft sigh. Then came the knock, sharp, unfamiliar, cold. Ada flinched. Grace paused. Aid wiped his hands on a towel and walked toward the door. When he opened it, the world he'd built, slowly, painfully, lovingly, trembled. Stella stood there, the woman who walked away, the mother who disappeared without a goodbye, the wife who chose glittering city lights over her child's bedtime tears. She looked flawless. Perfect hair, perfect heels, perfect posture, like someone stepping off a magazine cover. Not someone who left behind a crumbling home 3 years ago. Her smile was rehearsed, polished a little too sweet to be real. "Hello, Aid," she purred, "as if you were expecting me." Aid felt his spine lock. Ada's drawing pencil slipped from her fingers. Grace stayed frozen behind the hallway wall, unseen but already wounded by the tone in Stella's voice. "W, what are you doing here?" Aid managed. Stella brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Aid remembered all too well. "I've been thinking," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "This is my home, my family, and I want my life back." Her gaze swept across the room. The clean floors, the scented candles, the organized shelves, and her eyebrow flicked upward. "You've changed things." Aid swallowed hard. "We had to." Just then, Ada stepped into view, small and hesitant, clutching her old stuffed bunny. Stella's face softened, but not with love, more like someone performing affection for a camera. "My baby," she cooed, bending down. "Come give Mommy a hug." Ada didn't move, didn't blink, didn't smile. Her tiny voice cracked. "You left." Stella's smile twitched. "Yes, well, Mommy had some issues to handle. But I'm here now, and that's what matters. From the corner of the hall, Grace watched silently, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't want to be seen. Not yet. The moment wasn't hers. But Stella noticed her anyway, and her eyes hardened instantly. Oh. Her lips curled into a blade-sharp smile. So this is the help. Grace stepped forward, calm but shaken. Hello, I know who you are, Stella cut in, waving her hand dismissively. The maid. Ade's jaw clenched. Her name is Grace. Stella's gaze turned icy. How adorable. You've named the help. Grace lowered her eyes, not out of shame, but to keep herself from breaking the fragile piece already shattering at their feet. Ada moved toward Grace instinctively, slipping her small hand into Grace's, a silent message, a simple truth. This is the woman who stayed. Stella's eyes flicked to their joined hands, a spark of jealousy lit behind her perfectly lined lashes. Well, she said sharply, that must end immediately. I'm here now, and I'll be taking back my role as Ada's mother and as your wife. It felt something inside him twist painfully. You left, Stella. She stepped closer, her perfume suffocating him with memories he no longer wanted. Ade, you know me. I made mistakes, but we were good together once. Remember the nights we stayed up dreaming? The plans we made? You can't just erase our history. Her voice softened into practiced vulnerability. I miss us. Grace took a slow step back, as if giving them space. Or maybe as if she feared she was about to lose the home she'd grown to love. Stella saw that, and she smirked. She placed her manicured hand on Ade's arm. We can fix everything, if you just let me back in. Ade felt the old confusion churn in his chest, the guilt, the memories, the chaos, the part of him that still remembered loving her, even if the love had been bruised long before she left. Grace couldn't see his face, but she could feel the shift in the air, the storm of his emotions, the weight of a past he thought he buried. Stella whispered, let's be a family again. Ada stepped forward, her voice trembling. No. The room fell silent. Stella blinked. Excuse me. Ada's chin quivered. Her hand clutched Grace's dress tighter. Please don't send Grace away. Ade's breath caught. Stella's eyes widened in offense. Grace's heart nearly stopped. Ada swallowed hard and whispered the truth she had held deep in her tiny chest. Daddy, Grace makes the house feel warm. She makes me feel safe. Tears filled her eyes, the kind she rarely let anyone see. She stayed. Her voice cracked. Mommy, you didn't. Stella's face stiffened, a mix of shock and anger. Is this what you've been teaching her? She accused Grace. To reject her own mother? Grace shook her head immediately. No, never. I would never. Enough. Stella's necked. You don't get to speak here. Ada flinched. Ade stepped forward protectively. Stella, that's enough. But Stella had more weapons. She turned back to Ade with wet eyes, playing her final card. Do you really think she'll love another woman more than her mother? Ade, she's confused. And it's your fault for letting someone else take my place. Grace felt her heart fracture, not because of Stella's words, but because somewhere deep inside, she feared they might be true. Ade stood there, torn between a ghost from his past and the woman who brought life back into his home. His voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what to do. Ada pressed her forehead against his arm. Daddy, please don't let her leave. And in that small, trembling sentence, everything shifted. Everything cracked open. Everything changed. Ade looked at his daughter. Her fear, her truth, her desperate plea. He looked at Grace, her trembling hands, her silent heartbreak, her love woven into every corner of their lives. And then he looked at Stella, the storm that returned with lightning instead of love. This moment, this crossroads, would change everything that came next. The house felt different that night, as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting to see whether the past would be allowed to break everything again, or whether love would be brave enough to stand its ground. After Stella's stormy reappearance, Ada hid quietly in her room, clutching her stuffed bunny. Grace cleaned up the kitchen with shaky hands, trying to pretend she wasn't unraveling. And Ade, he sat at the dining table, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands, drowning in questions he never wanted to face. Stella wanted her life back. Grace wanted to disappear before she caused pain. Ada wanted the only person who had truly stayed. And Ade, he wanted to do right by everyone. But for the first time in years, he finally asked himself the real question: what is a family made of? Blood, guilt, history, or love, consistency, kindness, the hands that hold you when you break? He thought of Stella, beautiful, magnetic, unpredictable, always running, always chasing something brighter, something newer. She gave Ada life, but she did not stay to watch that life grow. Then he thought of Grace, quiet, resilient, steady. She didn't share Ada's blood. She didn't have Stella's sparkle. She didn't make big promises or dramatic gestures. She simply stayed. She cared. She healed what she had no obligation to heal. Every smile Ada rediscovered had Grace's fingerprints on it. Every peaceful night, every warm meal, every moment of laughter, Grace had built it with gentle hands. It finally exhaled, a long, trembling breath. The truth had been there all along. He had just been too afraid to choose it. He stood up, walked toward the kitchen, and found Grace wiping a counter that was already spotless. She wasn't crying, but her eyes held the shimmer of someone who had been fighting tears for hours. "Grace," he said softly. She froze, then slowly turned. "I'm sorry," she whispered before he could say another word. "I shouldn't have been here when she came back. I didn't want to cause trouble." "You didn't cause trouble," Ade said gently. "You brought peace." Grace looked down, her voice fragile. "But she's Ada's mother. You had a life with her. I don't want to stand in the way of that." Ade stepped closer. "You're not standing in the way. You're holding us together." Her eyes lifted, full of disbelief and longing. Longing she had buried so deep she never expected to hear her own heart echo in his. Ade swallowed, gathering courage he never thought he'd need again. "I need to say something. And I should have said it long before today." Grace's breath hitched. "Ade, don't. Not now. Emotions are high. Everything is messy. Please don't say something you'll regret." But Ade shook his head. "I won't regret this." He took her hands, hands that had cooked for him, comforted his daughter, held his broken home together piece by piece. "Grace, I've fallen for you." Her eyes widened, mouth parting in shock. "I tried to ignore it. I kept telling myself you were just helping us, that I was only grateful for your kindness. But that isn't the truth." He breathed out. "You brought life back into this home. You brought light back into Ada. You brought hope back into me." Grace shook her head slowly, her throat tight. "Ade, don't say this unless you truly mean it." "I do," he whispered. "I mean every word." Tears finally escaped her eyes, not from pain, but from the unbearable relief of being seen, truly seen. "I love you," she said softly. "So much it scares me." Ade closed his eyes, letting the words sink into him like warmth after a long winter. But before he could answer, a voice sliced through the room. "Well, isn't this touching?" Stella stood in the doorway, arms crossed, fury turning her elegant beauty into something sharp and venomous. "I come back from my family, and I find you confessing your feelings to the nanny?" Her voice trembled with rage. "To my husband?" Ade straightened immediately. "Stella, we're not together anymore." "You think that matters?" she snapped. "I left. I didn't sign divorce papers." "That means you're still mine." Grace stepped back instinctively, but Ade reached for her hand. "Grace isn't the problem, Stella," he said quietly. "The problem was never her." Stella's laugh cracked like glass. "Oh, how convenient. Blame me for everything while this woman slithered into my place." Grace flinched, but Ade tightened his hold on her hand. "She didn't replace you. You left an empty space. She simply healed what was broken." Stella's voice dropped to a wounded whisper. "You're choosing her?" Ade didn't hesitate this time. "Yes." Stella blinked, stunned. She had never imagined he'd actually say it out loud. Just then, small footsteps echoed down the hallway. Ada appeared sleepy-eyed, holding her stuffed bunny. She saw Stella first, then Grace. Then her father's hand wrapped around Grace's. Stella crouched. "Ada, sweetheart, Mommy is staying. We're a family again." Ada didn't move toward her. Instead, she walked to Grace and took her hand firmly. Grace, she whispered, voice trembling, please don't go. Stella's jaw dropped. Ada? I'm your mother. Ada looked at her, eyes full of old hurt, new fear, and one simple truth. You left, she said softly, and she stayed. Stella's face crumbled, not because she understood, but because she realized she had lost control. Aid crouched beside Ada. She leaned into him, Grace standing on her other side. Then Ada lifted her small hand, placing it over Grace's and Aid's joined hand at a child's innocent decision, at a child's pure heart speaking louder than years of chaos. This is my family, she whispered. Her voice was soft, but unshakable. I choose Grace. Stella staggered to her feet, mascara smudging with angry tears. You'll regret this, she hissed. Aid, you'll regret throwing away what we had. Aid stood tall, unflinching. What we had, he said gently, was gone long before you left. Stella looked at Ada one last time, the daughter she could have loved, but never chose to. Then she turned, heels clicking sharply, and walked out the door. This time, it didn't chase her, he didn't beg, he didn't break. The door closed, the storm left, and a quiet, healing stillness filled the room. Grace looked at Aid, breath trembling. I never wanted to replace anyone. Aid smiled, his thumb brushing her hand. You didn't replace her. He looked at Ada, who hugged Grace tightly. You became family. Grace's tears fell freely now, tears of belonging, of love, of choosing and being chosen. Ada pressed her cheek against Grace. Daddy, she whispered, can she stay forever? Aid's voice softened. Yes, he said. She's staying. For as long as she wants. Grace's heartbeat fluttered. And how long is that? She whispered. Aid pulled her gently into his arms. Forever, he murmured, if you'll have us. Grace exhaled, a breath filled with love, relief, and the certainty of a home she never expected to find. Ada wrapped her arms around both of them in that small living room. Once broken, once cold, once filled only with the echoes of loss, a new family stood together, the family not born from blood, but from love chosen, love earned, love held tightly. Aid, Grace, Ada, not perfect, not traditional, but real, that a family formed by choice, a family strong enough to weather any storm. Months passed, and the house that once felt like a collapsing memory now shone with a warmth so natural it was hard to imagine it had ever been different. Sunlight spilled across the living room each morning, catching on the small paper butterflies Ada had hung from the ceiling. Laughter echoed from the kitchen where breakfast had become a shared ritual, not a daily disaster. And the silence that once pressed against the walls had been replaced with music, the soft humming of Grace, Ada's giggles, Aid's quiet joy. Ada was thriving in ways Aid had only dreamed of. Her teachers said she was more confident, more present, more alive. She brought friends home. She danced in the hallway. She asked questions again, big ones, curious ones children ask when they finally feel safe. Aid had healed too. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but piece by piece, day by day, doth he know. Longer woke up feeling like a failure. The weight he carried for years didn't crush him anymore. He smiled more. He breathed easier. He let himself hope and grace. Grace was no longer the nanny. She was part of the home, its heart, its anchor, its warmth. She had her own shelf in the hallway for her shoes, her mug in the kitchen, her laughter stitched into every memory they were making. Aid couldn't pinpoint the moment she stopped being Grace who helps us and became simply Grace who belongs here. It happened naturally, as all real love does. Then came her birthday. Ada woke up before sunrise, tiptoeing into the living room with a small box filled with colored markers, stickers, and glitter. She worked quietly, tongue peeking out in concentration, crafting something delicate, something she'd been planning for weeks. When Grace came out for breakfast, hair messy and eyes still sleepy, Ada practically bounced to her. "Close your eyes," she demanded. Grace obeyed with a laugh. Ada guided her to the couch, placed something gently in her hands, and whispered, "Now open." Grace lifted the handmade card, its edges uneven, glitter sprinkled everywhere like tiny stars. the front read in Ada's handwriting. To Annie Grace, my favorite person inside, in big wobbly letters it said, "You're the best mom in the world." The room went still. Grace froze. Her breath hitched. Her eyes filled instantly, tears rising faster than she could blink them away. "Ada," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her hand trembled as she traced the crooked hearts Ada had drawn. Ada crawled in her lap, wrapping her arms tightly around her. "I mean it," she said softly. "You take care of me. You stay with me. You love me. That makes you my mom." Grace's tears fell freely then, not out of sadness, but out of overwhelming, life-changing love. Abe stood by the doorway, watching the moment unfold with a heart so full it almost hurt. He swallowed hard, feeling emotion swell in his chest. Grace held Ada close, laughing and crying all at once. "I love you," she whispered into Ada's hair. "So much. More than you'll ever know." Ade walked over slowly, placing his hand on Grace's shoulder. She looked up at him, cheeks wet, eyes shining with a kind of joy he had never seen before. In that moment, Ade understood something deeply, clearly, beautifully. He didn't rebuild his life. Grace did. She had taken the broken pieces, his fears, Ada's tears, the home that once echoed with loss, and turned them into something whole again, and together. The three of them had built a new beginning, a future filled with warmth, a home filled with hope, a family built not from blood, but from unconditional, chosen love. Ade wrapped his arms around both of them, and Ada nestled happily between them, still clutching her glittery card. They laughed, they cried, they held each other close at a complete family, a second chance, a new beginning. One Grace had unknowingly gifted them all. Sometimes a small act of kindness doesn't just save a life, it creates an entire future. She was just a forgotten child sleeping on the sidewalk, but someone chose to stop, listen, and believe in her. And today, she isn't a victim of circumstance, she's a living reminder that hope grows the moment someone cares. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because together, we can spread more stories that inspire, heal, and bring light into someone's darkness. See you in the next video.